All right, so the Northern Cape, they've got this, like, really ambitious plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Provincial Spatial Development Framework.
Okay.
Basically, it's a blueprint for the entire province's future. We're talking, like, where things get built, how resources are
Oh,
allocated.
that's a big undertaking.
It is,
That's
right. But it's not just lines on a map. Today, we're going to really untangle how this thing actually gets built.
I like it getting into the nitty-gritty.
Exactly, focusing on all that behind-the-scenes stuff, governance and implementation.
Well, and what's interesting to me is that this document, it tries to tackle some really big issues facing the Northern Cape. We're talking about climate change, inequality, just limited resources overall.
Yeah, those are some serious challenges.
They are. So it's not just about like where to put a new road. It's about building a more sustainable future, a more equitable future.
Okay, so big goals.
Yeah.
But how do they make sure it doesn't just stay a wish list? How do they actually make this happen?
Right. That's where the governance comes in. You've got the national government kind of setting the broad strokes, the big picture, right?
Right.
Then the province takes the lead, and finally, each municipality kind of tailors it to their local needs. It's a huge coordination effort.
Oh, I bet. That's a lot of different groups to get on the same page.
It is. It is.
So how do they even begin?
Well, think of the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act as like the rule book.
Okay.
It lays down who does what, who has the authority to make decisions, how are decisions made.
Got it. So it keeps everyone, like, playing by the same rules.
Exactly. Like a referee in a game, making sure things stay fair.
I like that analogy. But, okay, the Northern Cape is huge.
Oh, yeah.
It's diverse. How do they balance what the national government wants with what people actually need on the ground in those different communities?
Right, and that is a key challenge. The PSDF has to grapple with that.
I bet.
They have these mechanisms in place. They call them intergovernmental relations and spatial development coordination.
Ooh, those sound a little bureaucratic.
They do. But basically what it means is making sure that everyone has a seat at the table.
So we're talking town councils, provincial officials, even national folks, all having to actually talk to each other.
Exactly. And not just talking, but compromising, you know?
Yeah.
Finding solutions that work for that tiny Karoo town A&D fit into the national strategy.
Oh, I can see how that would be tricky.
It is. It's a delicate dance.
Okay, I'm starting to see the complexity here, but let's talk about the brass tacks for a second. How do they actually build stuff? Where does the money come from for all of this?
That's where the Capital Investment Framework comes in, or CIF.
Okay.
Think of it like the province's shopping list. They've got these big dreams, but they also have to, figure out what they can afford.
That's practical.
Right, and then prioritize what are the most impactful items on that list.
Makes sense. So how do they decide which projects get the green light? Is there some kind of, like, point system?
They do, actually. It's called the Northern Cape Planning Scorecard.
The NCPS.
The NCPS, yeah. They use it to evaluate projects based on things like, how much economic growth can it create? How well does it address regional inequality? Does it improve service delivery?
So it's not just about building the fanciest things. It's about building things that actually make a difference.
Exactly. And, to make things even more interesting, they are looking at some seriously ambitious projects. Things like the Boogabye green hydrogen development and massive renewable energy zones.
Wait, green hydrogen? Is that even a thing?
It is. And it could be huge for the Northern Cape. Imagine a province powered by clean energy, exporting green hydrogen to the world. That's the kind of future that the PSDF is shooting for.
Okay, now that's a vision. I like that. But what happens to the projects that don't make the cut? Are they just, like, tossed in the bin?
Not necessarily. The PSDF really emphasizes scenario planning. They analyze different possibilities. What if this happens? What if that happens? What are the challenges we might run into? So even projects with lower scores might still have a role to play.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Right. There's room for flexibility. They need to be able to adjust as they go.
Makes sense. The world is constantly changing.
Exactly. And the Northern Cape needs a plan that can adapt with it.
We're definitely seeing that governance part of this deep dive in action. But I want to zoom in a bit. What does this plan mean for the smaller towns that are kind of scattered all across the Northern Cape?
That's where it gets really interesting. They're focusing on something called small town regeneration,
Okay.
breathing new life into these communities.
What does that actually look like? Are we talking like fancy new buildings or something deeper?
Think targeted investment strategies. They're looking at, improving infrastructure, so roads, water systems, internet connectivity, the basic building blocks for growth.
Yeah, it makes those towns more attractive.
Exactly, for residents and for businesses.
Right.
They're also focusing on creating new economic opportunities, particularly in sectors that play to the Northern Cape's strength.
Okay, so like what? Diamond Mines 2.0?
Not quite. Think more along the lines of ecotourism, sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, industries that are environmentally friendly, A&D, economically viable.
So creating jobs that are good for the planet, A&D good for the people.
Precisely. And it's not just about attracting big companies. They're also working to support existing small businesses, helping them grow and thrive.
This all sounds incredibly positive, but I can't help but wonder about potential downsides.
Sure.
Like, what about the risk of gentrification? Where these improvements end up pushing out longtime residents.
That's a valid concern, and it's something that the PSDF acknowledges.
Okay, good.
They're really emphasizing the importance of inclusive development, ensuring that these improvements benefit everyone, not just newcomers or, those with deeper pockets.
Yeah, it's about striking that balance.
Right. Attracting investment, but also protecting the interests of existing communities.
And that's where those mechanisms for public participation come in.
Absolutely. Stakeholder engagement. They're actively seeking input from residents, making sure that their voices are heard and their needs are considered.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
It's not just like a talk-down plan.
No, it's about bringing everyone along on the journey.
Okay, but can we circle back to the governance aspect for a moment? We've talked about all these different players, national government, provincial officials, municipalities. How do they actually make sure that everyone is working together effectively?
It's definitely a challenge.
I mean, herding cats seems easier.
It's complex,
Yeah.
but one key strategy they're using is something called intergovernmental relations.
IGR.
IGR, exactly.
Okay, but what does that even mean?
Think of it as fostering regular communication, collaboration between all those different levels of government. Regular meetings, shared platforms, open dialogue.
Breaking down those silos?
Exactly, making sure everyone is on the same page. And then they also have these spatial development coordination structures to ensure that all the different sectoral plans, like those for housing, energy, water, they're all aligned with the PSDF's goals.
So it's like making sure all the different pieces of the puzzle fit together.
Precisely. And they're using that handy Northern Cape planning system, the NCPS.
The NCPS again. It's like
Yeah.
the Swiss Army knife of this whole PSDF.
It is. It pops up everywhere. But we've talked a lot about the what of this plan, the strategies, the goals, the mechanisms. What about the how? How do they actually translate all this into concrete action on the ground?
Well, that's where the rubber really meets the road. And it involves a multifaceted approach. But I think that's a story for the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
You'll have to come back to find out more. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about making all this development in the Northern Cape resilient to climate change.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around designing entire towns to handle those crazy conditions. It gets seriously intense out there. It does. One of their key strategies is what they call regional adaptation plans.
Okay.
So it's about tailoring the solutions to each area's specific challenges.
Oh, so what works on the coast might not work in the Karoo.
Exactly. Coastal towns, they might focus on sea level rise or storm surges,
Yeah.
Whereas inland, it's more about drought-resistant crops, water conservation, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. Be smart, adapt to the specific problems.
Right.
Okay, but what about those compact settlements you mentioned? That sounds kind of, I don't know, claustrophobic.
Oh, no, not like that. Think of them more like smartly designed communities where everything you need is walkable or bikeable.
Oh, okay.
Shops, schools, work, all close by.
So less sprawl, less driving.
Yeah, smaller environmental footprint.
And probably cheaper to run, too, right? Less infrastructure needed.
Exactly. Plus, it can actually foster a stronger sense of community, when people are closer together.
Makes sense.
And services like public transport, they just work better, more efficient.
Okay, so compact settlements. I'm getting it.
Mm-hmm.
But can we go back to those small towns for a sec? We talked about small town regeneration, but what are they actually doing to make those places, thrive again?
Well, a big part of it is just basic upgrades.
Upgrades.
Yeah, to infrastructure. Roads, water systems, making sure the internet works, that kind of stuff.
So the foundations, basically.
The building blocks. Got to have that in place.
Right, make it livable, attractive.
For residents, yeah, but also businesses.
Right.
Want to attract investment, right?
Definitely. But attracting businesses, doesn't that mean New industries? What kind of industries are we talking here?
Well, they're smart about it. They're focusing on the things that, play to the Northern Cape's strength.
Okay, strengths. So, like, are we bringing back diamond mines or something?
Not quite. Think more like ecotourism, sustainable agriculture, and definitely renewable energy.
Yeah.
Industries that are good for the environment, but also, make financial sense.
Jobs, environment, win-win.
That's the idea. And it's not just about, like, big companies coming in. They want to support existing small businesses, too, help them grow.
That's good. Support what's already there.
Exactly.
Okay, so it all sounds super positive. But I got to ask, is there a downside? Like, all this investment, doesn't that, run the risk of pushing out the people who already live there?
You're talking about gentrification.
Yeah.
That's a valid concern. And, to their credit, the PSDF folks, they get that.
They do.
They're putting a lot of emphasis on inclusive development, making sure that everyone benefits, not just the newcomers.
Oh, good. So finding that balance.
Right. Got to find that balance. And that's where all that public participation stuff comes in, stakeholder engagement. They're actively getting input from residents, making sure everyone has a say.
That's good to hear. It's not just some plan being imposed, like, from on high.
Exactly. It's a collaborative process.
Okay, but back to the governance for a sec, because I'm still kind of boggled by all the moving parts. Like, we've got national government, provincial, the municipalities. How on earth do they keep everyone on the same page?
Yeah, it's juggling act, that's for sure.
I mean, it's like herding cats seems easier.
Well, one thing they do is this intergovernmental relations thing, IGR.
Right, IGR, we talked about that before. But remind me, what does that actually look like in practice?
It's a lot of communication, lots of collaboration, like regular meetings, shared platforms where they can all, see what's going on, open dialogue, all that.
Okay, so it's like relationship building, but between institutions.
Yeah, exactly. Keeping those lines of communication open. And then they also have these spatial development coordination structures to make sure all the different sectors like housing, energy, that they're all on the same page as the PSDF.
So it's like one big symphony and everyone has to be playing the same tune.
Exactly. And that handy NCPS helps keep track of everything.
The NCPS. It's like the conductor's baton.
That's a good way to put it. But, we've talked a lot about the what of this plan, the goals, the strategies. But what about the how W? How do they actually, put this into action?
Well, that's where capacity building comes in.
Capacity building.
Yeah, so that's like training people, giving them the skills, the knowledge they need to actually make this happen.
Oh, okay. So it's investing in the people who are actually going to be doing the work.
Exactly. They have training programs for government officials, community leaders, even folks in the private sector.
So it's like everyone's got to be on board and empowered.
Exactly. And it's not just like throwing information at them. They're fostering a whole culture of learning, collaboration.
So it's like building a shared understanding.
Yeah, and ownership of the plan.
Yeah.
And then alongside that, they're, developing systems, processes to make the whole implementation run smoothly.
So making it efficient.
Efficient, yeah.
Yeah.
Cutting through red tape, making sure things actually get done. And they're using technology, data analytics, online platforms, all that. So it's like a modern approach to governance.
Absolutely. But it's not just about the tools, it's about the mindset. They're really pushing for accountability. Like everyone has to be responsible for their part in making this succeed.
I see. So it's not just ticking boxes, it's about taking ownership.
That's it. But, even the best laid plans, they run into problems.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got this big focus on monitoring and evaluation. They're always gathering data, tracking progress, adjusting as needed.
So it's not just some static document. It's got to be a living thing.
Exactly. Always adapting to changing realities. And that's what's so impressive about this whole thing, It's not about dictating outcomes. It's about creating a framework for sustainable, inclusive development that can evolve.
It's ambitious.
It is.
But it also sounds really expensive. How are they going to pay for all this?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question. And it's the perfect place to pick up in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back, and we've seen how ambitious this PSDF is. But let's be real, none of it happens without, funding. How are they going to pay for all of this?
That's where the Capital Investment Framework comes in, the CIF.
CIF.
It's basically the province's financial plan. Where are we going to spend money to make the biggest impact?
So like their budget, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, they're looking at government funding.
Right.
But they're also, exploring these public-private partnerships.
Oh, okay.
And even trying to attract investment from overseas.
So getting creative with the funding makes sense.
Gotta be, gotta be.
But with so many potential projects, how do they choose? Like, how do they decide what to prioritize?
Well, they have this whole multi-criteria evaluation process. It's kind of complicated, but basically it's a ranking
A
system.
ranking system, okay.
Yeah. They look at how well a project aligns with the PSDF's goals, the economic and social impact, environmental sustainability, and, of course, the financial side of things. Does it make financial sense?
So they're really considering everything, not just throwing money at whatever sounds cool.
Exactly. Got to be smart about it.
Yeah.
And, of course, the NCPS plays a big role, too, in evaluating and prioritizing.
The NCPS, always the NCPS.
Everywhere. It's like their built-in check and balance system.
Right, right. But even with the best planning, sometimes there are unexpected costs, right? Stuff happens. How do they deal with that?
Well, for one, they do contingency planning. So setting aside funds for those just-in-case scenarios.
Smart, like a rainy day fund, but for, like, the whole province.
Exactly.
But with all this money floating around, how do they make sure it's being spent responsibly? No funny business.
That's where transparency and accountability come in. Those are huge sheep-free priorities for them. They've got all these procedures in place, accounting, audits, checks and balances to prevent any corruption.
So being very careful with the money.
Oh, yeah. Spending it wisely, ethically, all that.
Makes sense.
And, they make all their financial information public.
Oh.
So that citizens can actually see how their money's being used.
Yeah.
It's about building trust, making sure that the development is really accountable to the people.
That's really good. Okay, so we've talked about the money, but stepping back a bit, how do we know if all this is actually working? Like, what does success look like for this whole PSDF thing?
Well, that's where those intended outcomes come in.
The outcomes, right.
They paint a picture of what a thriving Northern Cape should look like. And it's not just about the economy,
So not just, like, GDP and job numbers.
Right. It's much more than that. Imagine, like, a province where the government is truly aligned, everyone working together toward that shared vision, sustainable development that really prioritizes the long-term health of the people or the planet.
All right.
And resilient communities that can handle whatever challenges come their way.
That's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
But how do we know this isn't just like a dream? What makes you think it can actually happen?
Because they're not just talking about it, they're doing it. They have concrete actions, strategies in place, everything from capacity building and stakeholder engagement to, these innovative financing mechanisms and, of course, the NCPS.
The NCPS, always there.
Always. They've really thought about this from every angle. It's not some dusty old document. It's a living plan that they're already putting into action.
That's impressive, honestly. So much more than just building stuff. It's about building a better future.
It is for the people of the Northern Cape. A future where everyone has a real chance to thrive.
Well said. So for our listener, what would you say is like the key takeaway from all of this?
I'd say the Northern Cape is taking charge. They've got a plan, they've got the will, and they're making it happen. It's a real testament to the power of planning, of collaboration, and just a genuine desire to make things better.
It's inspiring, honestly. So to our listeners, if you're ever feeling down about the state of the world, remember the Northern Cape. Remember that positive change. It's possible.
It is, absolutely. And if you want to learn more, check out the full PSDF document. It's online, easy to find. It's a roadmap to a better future. And maybe it'll even inspire you to get involved in your own community.
Yeah, get out there and make a difference. Well, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic, ready to unpack all the details and share those hidden gems of knowledge. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep believing in a brighter future.